You're listening to KZOM, Oleander Public Radio. Welcome to People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos with Dave and DB.
Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. I am one of your hosts, DB Spitzer. To my virtual right, as always, David Heath. How the heck are you doing this week?
As always, I am doing well.
Yes, good to hear. Good to hear. And I should say, Farmer Dave, as you are the resident farmer, how's everything out on the goat farm this week?
Cold.
Yeah. We're supposed to get a lot more snow than what they said, I guess.
Yeah, but that's okay. I'm not complaining about the lack of snow.
I'm sure the goats aren't either.
Yeah, goats call snow the curse of Pan.
Gotcha.
They do not like snow. They do not like the way it crunches on their hooves or makes their fur feel. They do not like snow at all, and they know that it's all the farmer's fault.
Yep. All right. So, speaking of faults, I don't have a good segue, and that's my fault. But this
I like to blame it on San Andreas.
Okay.
I like to say it's San Andreas' fault.
All right. So
our friends in California are laughing.
Oh, yes. And then anyone else is like, what do you mean GTA 5?
Welcome to Innsmouth, stranger.
Hi, I'm Rob Whiten from the Innsmouth Book Club. Join me and my fellow guide John Chadwick as we take you on a fortnightly tour of Innsmouth. We visit places such as the Picture House, the Library and Innsmouth Museum to discuss all aspects of weird fiction, whether it be book, film, music, TV or art. As well as that, we stop over at the Gilman House to have a chat with a resident guest. That includes authors, artists, musicians, in fact Lovecraftian creatives of all types. You can find our free shows on Patreon, and there you can also sign up as a patron, which brings you bonus content, plus a monthly PDF copy of Innsmouth News, which features articles, author spotlights, all the latest news and reviews, and more. You can find us at patreon.com/InnsmouthBC. We hope to see you soon, because remember, Innsmouth isn't just a place, it's a state of mind.
So let's talk about Richard Upton Pickman for a moment.
All right.
What do we got besides the fact that Richard Upton Pickman, R.U. Pickman, was first featured in a short story by H.P. Lovecraft written in September 1926, first published October 1927 in Weird Tales, and appeared in a 1972 episode of the anthology series Night Gallery. That's your basic kind of like...
And a more recent version.
Oh, yeah.
He also appears in Del Toro's Cabinets of Curiosity.
Gotcha. I still haven't watched that one yet.
Yes. So I've got a question for you.
Go for it.
Nobody has ever said this, but this is me. Who do you think Richard Upton Pickman is based on?
Oh, goodness. I have no idea.
Okay, I'm going to throw this out. And we're immediately, ST Joshy's going to call us, and Ken's going to call us, and Scott Glancy's going to call us and say that I am terrible disinformation. But I think he's based on Robert W. Chambers.
Okay. All right.
So here's why. First of all, Chambers was an artist.
Yeah.
As well as a writer. He was an artist. He was known for his eccentric sort of uh, art style. He had learned to paint in France, spent some
Hmm.
time in France, but at this time also, Lovecraft is just finishing up um, um, supernatural horror.
Yeah.
His book on writing horror and on other horror books. So he's done a deep dive into some of Chambers' stories, The King in Yellow, some of his other stories. So personally, and again, I'm sure is going to come and tell us why I'm wrong.
Hmm.
I think Chambers was on his mind.
All right.
And during this time, Pickman appears in two stories.
Yeah.
He appears in two different forms, physical forms. He appears in Pickman's Motto, of course, but the Dream Quest of the Unknown Cadet, where
Okay.
he has completely metamorphosized into a ghoul, and he's
Aha.
now living in the Dreamlands. This is actually written about the same time, within months.
Okay.
Uh, and that's one of the rare occasions that, and even though they're kind of different characters, and I've always got the impression that Pickman's model was sort of almost a spin-off. It's kind of what we now call prequel
Yeah. Yeah.
about where this character came from.
Hmm.
Um, and so um, Lovecraft, like I said, even I don't even think Professor Artemis. I mean, he appears as mentioned, but he only appears in one story.
Yeah.
Uh, Randolph Carter is a little bit different, but it's kind of unique that Pickman appears in two different stories, and they were
Yeah.
both written close enough together that
Hmm.
I think Lovecraft's in his mind he kind of tie them together.
Yeah. Yeah. I when we talk about artists for Pickman's model, like Lovecraft actually name checks
Quite a
quite a
few.
few artists. He name checks Goya. He name checks Sidney Syme, who was a artist for or weird fiction, and also his friend and pen pal Clark Ashton Smith is name checked,
Yeah.
along with other artists. But there's quite a few that he compares Pickman's grotesque artwork to. Um, but yeah, no, and I'm trying to think of like how he's even described in physicality, or if he is described in physicality. Um,
I don't really think he is.
yeah,
I don't think he is, and I'm going completely off my memory. I think we just get the narrator's version of him.
yeah,
The narrator is talking about him.
hmm, hmm,
There are definitely different artists who've gone
yes,
and drawn pictures of him, both in his human and ghoul form.
certainly, yeah. But I don't think we've actually gotten a description of what Pickman may have looked like. I may be wrong. I may be wrong.
But
I
we
didn't
do
do the
have,
in-depth reading that I should have, but
but we do have
yes.
a drawing by Lovecraft of a ghoul.
Oh yeah.
So I had not seen this. I mean, Lovecraft was a better sketcher artist than I
Hmm.
was, than I
All
am.
right. Yeah.
But he's no Pickman.
Sure.
And his most famous picture is, of course, going to be the one that looks like Cthulhu taking a dump.
Yes.
But he also did a picture that you can find online of the ghoul, and which I believe is actually supposed to be Pickman or the model of Pickman,
Uh huh.
where it definitely got it stands on two legs,
Yeah.
and if you Google and picture search of Lovecraft's version of a ghoul, it's probably I think a pencil or pen drawing, and it's kind of hunchback. Its arms are drooping, but it is standing on 2 feet with a bent in the knee and that dog-like face,
Yeah.
which is given a very detailed description in Pickman's model. The paintings are.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm looking at the image right now, and I'm like reading the detail on the stone. Yeah, no, it's cool. It's really cool. One of the tombstones really makes me think of the intro to Mystery on PBS.
Yes, yes. Now, one thing that I was also sort of thinking.
Yeah,
So Pickman is a New England, Salem, Massachusetts family name.
sure. Yeah.
And Lovecraft does this quite a bit. He uses names that of established New England families.
Yeah.
But he also kind of does a pun. And the most famous, I think, of course, is Gilman.
Mm-hmm.
Haha, they seem to be deep ones. But Pickman has to choose between being a human and a ghoul.
Yeah.
So again, nobody I've ever read, and we're gonna get such hate mail from scholars.
Sure.
But I think that Lovecraft had a sense of humor.
Yeah.
Lovecraft didn't always have an appropriate sense of humor,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe consciously or subconsciously, Pickman was chosen as this sort of, he's got to pick if he's going to be human or not.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, did we cover everything where Pickman can be found?
Well, by Lovecraft.
Okay.
Now, I know he is going to appear in a couple of Chaosium stories, or not
Sure.
stories, but modules.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of, it's a name dropper. I
Yeah.
mean, and so it's sort of, and he's not the bad guy in the Unknown Dream. I mean, the Dream of the Unknown Cadath.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of neutral-ish, but he helps Carter and vice versa.
Well, they're
So
cousins.
yeah. So he does appear as I think the guide in several Chaosium books.
All right. All right. I wanted to say one of my favorite things to say and point out are Richard Upton Pickman is found in Fallout 4 as a person who makes grotesque paintings and also kills raiders and makes paintings out of their blood.
As one does.
Yeah. You can either rescue him and, help him out, or you can, kill him yourself. But yeah, you get some stuff. And let's see. Pickman's known paintings were Ghoul Feeding, The Lesson, ghouls teaching apparently human child how to feed like themselves, a cross section of Beacon Hill with ghouls living in galleries, subway accident, ghouls attacking a crowd in a Bolston Street subway by coming through a crack, and Holmes, Lowell, and Longfellow lie buried in Mount Auburn, ghouls in a vault reading and laughing at a Boston guidebook.
Which I bet Lovecraft just thought was hilarious.
Oh yeah, no. I'm sure he thought all of these. Yeah, no, this is one of his kind of he's laughing to himself while he's writing it out in longhand.
Yes.
He's like, oh, I know some Pickmans that would be mad about this. Ooh, Uptons as well. I'll get them. Those snooty snoots.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that was his plan all along.
Yeah, but no, Pickman's model, Richard Upton Pickman. Yeah, the one that I remember is, I believe, in the Dream Quest or the Dreamlands guidebook, there's Pickman's Apprentice, which is an interesting one. I don't want to go into it too much because I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't played it yet. But yeah, that's a good one. That's a nice appearance by Pickman. No. And as far as antagonists go and protagonists go, and I don't know, Pickman's not bad. Pickman's not a bad, it's like, oh, you want to see something crazy? I'll show you something crazy. That is what Pickman is good for. Oh, you want to get out of this Veil of Panath? I'll show you how to get out of this Veil of Panath.
He as a character, I would say he is more of a guide.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely more of a guide, not a main character, and not necessarily a bad guy. I mean, they're not eating living people. No. But I mean, actually, no. Kind of a bad guy. If you look at his like paintings, you're like, oh, yeah, that's not necessarily the greatest person there, but and purposely trying to make people upset with your paintings. I don't know, but hey, artists do what artists do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's Mr. Pickman.
Yeah. All right. Well, we should Pickman up this conversation and take it elsewhere. All right. So
Deep space.
Yeah. Let's take this conversation into deep space. So we're gonna take a break, and then we're gonna be back, and yeah.
Prepare for a spine-tingling, nerve-shattering podcast featuring all your favorite monsters. You won't believe your ears when you listen to Monster Kid Radio. Here are your hosts, Derek M. Cook, and his ever-rotating stable of guests discuss your favorite classic and sometimes not-so-classic monster movies. Subscribe to Monster Kid Radio through iTunes or Stitcher, or visit MonsterKidRadio.net before the next weekly episode of Monster Kid Radio. Go through the archives for interviews with Sarah Karloff, Victoria Price, and Joel Hodgson. Listen to discussions about movies like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Island of Terror, and King Kong. And don't forget convention coverage from Monster Bash and the HP Lovecraft Film Festival. Classic monsters, modern talk, and the head of Rondo Hatton. Only on Monster Kid Radio.
I want to tell you all about something. I want to tell you about a guy I know. In a place. This is Dave's Corner of the Podcast. It is awesome and it's gonna go fast. It's not the interview pod. Ha ha. Ha ha. It's not the pod where DB talks forever, ever, ever. No, it's Dave's Corner of the Podcast. Dave's Corner of the Podcast. Dave, everyone.
Okay, so this is the part of the show where I talk to somebody whose name is not DB. And today we are speaking with Scott Glancy. Now, Scott, you've been on the show, and I can't believe that most people listening here don't know who you are, but why don't you introduce yourself?
No, it's really easy not to know who I am, because while my work is relatively deep, it's also fairly narrow. I'm one of the authors of the original Delta Green role-playing game. Once upon a time, it was the Delta Green supplement for the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game, but we have since revamped it as its own standalone game, and I've been with that project since 1996. And, I've written a little bit for some other games. I got a few tiny things published in, I got some published in Dragon once. I got something, published in some, other fanzines like, The Unspeakable Oath, which was the flagship of Pagan Publishing when they, that's how they noticed me for getting to work on Delta Green. A couple other game systems like Twilight 2000 and for Hollow Earth Expedition, but I haven't written very broadly. I have mostly stuck very close to, sort of Lovecraftiana. Yog Sothothery, as the gentleman from Providence put it, the Cthulhu mythos, cosmic horror, and that sort of rigmarole. So if cosmic horror and perhaps the apocalypse and or pulp are not your thing, I can understand why you would not have heard of me.
But then again, you're probably not listening to this podcast.
Well, there's that too. If you're listening to the podcast, if there's so many podcasts in and you haven't heard of me, then there's something wrong. I am essentially the great value Ken Hyde. When you can't get Ken Hyde, you should always try me. I come at like half the price, and I will talk twice as long.
And worth every cent that we're paying you, or not.
Absolutely. I was about to say, yeah, I'm worth every penny.
Question for you.
All right.
And so to set this up, next week is Comic-Con at Portland, Fan Expo PDX. And I am going to be on a panel by our other good friends from Monster Kid Radio.
I love those guys.
And
Derek's great.
It's going to be classic horror movies for a new audience. So pick 3 movies, and I'll go over the first 2 real quickly that I think would be good movies for introducing a new people who haven't watched classic movies.
Okay.
One is, because I think it really is a masterpiece, The Birds.
Okay.
And that's because I think it's legitimate that So Bad Is Good is a legitimate reason to watch a movie, Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Oof. But it's not. Yeah. But it's not horror, is it?
Well,
I mean, it's
until they kick me off the panel. It is.
Yeah. I my only gripe about Plan 9 is that it's neither science fiction nor horror. It's like it's the greatest MSTK sketch ever written before there was MSTK.
Yeah. But no.
But I'm a little surprised you picked The Birds, only because when you said classic horror, you didn't go that far back, and you stuck with color.
And I'll talk the others, but and hopefully we're going to actually record this on the show.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to hear a mystery. Monster Kid Radio, why I chose The Bird. Mm-hmm. But number 3 is I wanted a movie that they don't make movies like this anymore. And I thought of you, and I chose Horror Express.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I am deeply, deeply honored because Horror Express is an amazing classic horror and yet also a cosmic horror movie. It starts off with the tropes of classic horror. And if you mean by classic, you mean Universal monster movie combined with Hammer Studios, right? But it's not a Universal horror movie, and it's not Hammer Studios, despite having all of the trappings of that. And instead, you end up with a horror movie that if you actually, sometimes it could be, it's ridiculous, but if you actually, put your brain to the concept of what the problem is quite disturbing.
Yep.
As the opposition, there's a moment in the movie where a fossil, a mummified Peking man-style anthropoid begins to come to life and stalk the train, murdering passengers. And I remember turning to my friend Blair Reynolds, the artist who used to do so much work for Pagan Publishing before he sadly passed away. And I looked at it and I said, Blair, you're going to look back on this section of the movie as the salad days of this movie, as the carefree halcyon days of the film, when there was nothing to worry about and everything was going swimmingly, when all we had to worry about was a mummified corpse of an Australopithecine carrying out grievous murders. And he looked at me like he was confused. And at some point, when that train is filled with reanimated, zombified Cossacks and it is hurtling towards a cliff, having been directed by the Russian government to crash the train rather than let the problem reach a populated area and get even worse, and the passengers are all being murdered by, blind zombie Cossacks, Blair turned to me and says, "You know what? You were right.
You're right. Yeah.
You were absolutely right. I've been in role playing. I've been in Call of Cthulhu games like this. Yeah, and that's the best thing about Horror Express. It feels like a Call of Cthulhu game come to life. It really does. Right down to an ensemble cast of, interesting NPCs and player characters. It's quite good. Thank you for including that one. But again, when you said classic horror movies, I kind of I think it's unfair that I discounted The Birds, because I would have considered anything from the Hammer catalog you suggested to be a classic monster movie. At first I was thinking just Universal, or at least the black and white movies. King Kong, Creature from the Black Lagoon, even though Creature is quite late. That's like the 50s. I would have been selecting something from that time period as classic monster movies rather than
and I would have, but I know the rest of the people in the panel are going to cover those very well.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. And yes, thank you very much for Horror Express. It is one of my all-time favorites. I got to introduce
Preaching the good word.
Yeah, let's keep spreading the good news about Horror Express. You can see all kinds of grainy, versions of it for free on YouTube and various places. But
have you heard of our Lord and Savior, Telly Savalas?
Yes, yeah. He does have one of my favorite lines in the whole movie, where the horrible body-shifting creature from time immemorial has been going around the train being its evil self, and the Russian priest, Orthodox priest, immediately changes horses. He's been a Russian priest his whole life. The first time he sees something supernatural, even though it's alien, but he sees something supernatural, he immediately changes sides, right? Because he's seen no proof of God his whole life, but he sees evil and he's like, "Oh, Satan, let's be sure of you, Satan." And the alien is like, "Yeah, screw you, dude. You're useless to me. You have no knowledge. You have no skills. Go away. You're just a shaman." And at some point, though, as the Cossacks, as Telly Savalas and his men just start blazing away with all their guns to gun down the body that the alien intelligence is in, the priest runs up and grabs him and pulls him away, and they're still shooting at him. And I think Christopher Lee says something like, "Careful, you might hit the priest." And Telly Savalas says, "We got lots of priests." I was like, that may be the most Russian thing I have ever heard in my life, where he's just, "We got lots of priests."
So we'll let you know, but that I believe they're going to record that panel, and it'll be on a Monster Kid radio show.
I look forward to hearing that. Derek does wonderful work. Derek,
absolutely.
If I'm pronouncing it right, and he does invaluable work. He's doing the Lord's work. Let's be honest. He really is.
So, okay, so that was my tangent, and thank you for getting on a tangent with me. I got a more of a question we kind of maybe laid out, talked a little bit about. And that's when a story is set is, almost as important as where it's set. Or at least to me. What are some of your thoughts about setting as a time period as a setting?
Well, certainly, I'll throw it back to the movie Horror Express. The fact that it is set in this time period of 1909, it's before the First World War, right? So you've got all these, it's Tsarist Russia, which is still an authoritarian state, and you're traveling from Harbin, China, all the way to St. Petersburg, so that Christopher Lee can move his fossil back to the British Museum. There's all kinds of great things about that time period. The train is relatively isolated. Nobody has a cell phone, despite the fact this is one of the most important arteries in the entire Russian Empire, right? This is how they keep touch with their Far Eastern possessions. And they've already had the Russo-Japanese War. But at the same time, the story starts off in China, in Harbin, and you're like, oh, why are all these Russians, in the train station? Well, they don't even bother telling you things like the Russian colonial grip on China was pretty strong, and they got to run the rail lines in China, no matter who the warlord of the province was, and this is actually just before the Chinese Revolution, so things aren't all lorded up. That's not going to happen until 1911. So this little time period is really important also as far as scientific understanding, because this is just at the dawn of the age of experimenting with rockets as a way to gain high altitude. And metallurgy is starting to come into its own in a way that is important also to the story. And anthropology is, there's this whole thing about peaking man, and Christopher Lee thinks he's tracking down the, sort of multiple genesis points for mankind, back when we thought there might be intelligent hominids grew up, and we have sort of learned that intelligent hominids may have grown up independently, but just not in the way we thought, you know what I mean? Around different parts of the earth. This is all before Olduvai Gorge, So the scientific setting is kind of interesting. Plus you get certain gaslight bullshit going on with like, the eye can record the last image it sees, which becomes an important plot point. And part of that moment, the eye can record the last image it sees, is hilarious, because maybe somebody back in 1909 would believe that.
Believe it, yeah.
Despite the fact that the movie's made in 1960, whatever, we don't believe it anymore. There's a thing where they do the experiment, and maybe because it's an alien, it works with the alien. I don't know. But there's all these things about that setting, the when of it, that not just the where, but the when of it make it, more compelling, at least to me, who's a big old giant history buff. I like whens because it can limit it changes my story vastly. Not just technology-wise, but let's say society-wise. I've always believed that we've been told a lot that isolation is the cornerstone of horror, right? Yeah. Oh no, we're up at Camp Crystal Lake and there's nobody around, we don't have cell phones because it's the 80s, and Jason Voorhees' mother, the only truly scary Voorhees, I would like to say. I'm just going to put that out there. I'll fight you in the parking lot. Yeah, Mrs. Voorhees is after us, and is murdering Kevin Bacon and everyone. Well, you're all isolated off at Camp Crystal Lake. You're isolated at Outpost 31, You're isolated in that weird little house in Night of the Living Dead, or the shopping mall in Dawn of the Dead, or whatever. Isolation is a big key to horror, and one of the ways that isolation is created is by, of course, taking away your technology, but also if you change society in certain ways by going back in time, you can become isolated despite the fact that there's people around you. Yeah. If you had characters in a story who were, from a minority, let's say they're women. Your women characters come out and said, oh my God, I saw, a monster with the things and stuff. And you're going to have guys go, oh, silly woman, who's going to believe you? Clearly you're suffering from hysteria and need a womb adjustment. It'll be, you'll get this thing where because of the social setting, the characters will be isolated, right? If they were hobos in a hobo jungle during the Depression, or a Hooverville shantytown, the authorities would not treat them with respect or take what they have to say seriously if there was a supernatural problem. They'd be called sternobums. If they were from the Latino or African-American community or the Chinese community, someplace, they would be dismissed or been called superstitious. I point out with some horror that I have a copy of the World Book Encyclopedia from 1936 sitting on a shelf behind me, which I sometimes use to research what people thought in another time period, right? If this is their this is their Wikipedia. What were how did it change, or how did it shape social, or, common sense, or commonly held ideas about the world? And when I looked up the entry for ghosts one time, we were playing Call of Cthulhu, and we had a ghost problem. I said, well, let's see what the encyclopedia says about ghosts. The last line in the encyclopedia under the heading of ghost it says, last sentence, the superstitious nature of the Negro has been well documented. And I'm just like, wow. Okay. Wow. Let's talk about institutional racism here for a second, where they're
I thought you were going to say ghosts were real.
No, I said something far worse. mostly that white people are terrible when they're allowed to edit books. But regardless, that attitude right there tells me, your African-American character comes to someone to report a problem, they're going to be dismissed as a superstitious know-nothing, right? And so going to different time periods can create situations where socially you're isolated, where the authorities will not believe you. It's kind of like that thing in, I'm going to go back to Horror Express. Oh no, we've got a terrible problem. Maybe the authorities will show up and help. Well, Telly Savalas is the authorities, and he shows up, and it does not help. Right? The authorities arrive to sort this problem out, and all they do is smash people in the head with things looking for a confession, just at random, which again is the most Russian thing I can think of. But that kind of isolation has a lot to do with the when socially, not just the when technologically. So I feel like we have the whole of human history, forward and backward, including speculative history, to play with. There's all depending on the kind of horror you want to create. It's some horrors are going to be better if they turn up in certain time periods. So are more piquant, as it were. So that I think it's extremely important.
Dave and DB go to the movies. Dave and DB go movies. Dave and DB go to the movies. Dave and DB go.
Hey, Dave.
Yes.
How's it going?
Fine. I have just woken up 2 parsecs away from Zeta Reticuli. I'm making it home to Antarctica Station.
I know. This wasn't in the contract.
Okay.
We're talking about... What's that?
Right.
We're talking about 1979's Ridley Scott film Alien, written by Dan O'Bannon, screenplay by Dan O'Bannon, Ronald Shusett, and featuring Tom Skerritt, John Hurt, and of course Sigourney Weaver. What's this movie about, Dave?
Well, so it is about space trekkers being attacked by a eldritch thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to say something. When this movie first came out, it was pretty much considered the scariest thing that had come out for decades.
Yeah.
And it's not as much now. And the reason why is we know what happens.
Yeah.
Even if you haven't seen the movie, spoilers, the girl and the cat survived.
Yes.
And the thing is, in my content has always been, and I think a lot of people agree with me on this, that this is more a horror movie set in space than a science fiction movie.
Yeah, it's Halloween in space. It's Halloween in space. Go for it.
And so one of the things I did to kind of get me back to sort of think about it is I looked on YouTube at the original trailer.
Oh, yeah.
For the movie. And it's definitely being marketed as a horror movie.
It
Yes,
definitely
there's
is.
science fiction aspects. But I also found something else that I thought was pretty interesting.
What's that?
I found the original Siskel and Ebert at the movies review from 1979.
Oh.
And I told you last week that there were two things that my family watched, The Muppet Show and Elvira together. Well, there was three that we did watch as a group. We would sit down and watch at the movies.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of interesting because they're deliberately not trying to spoil some things. And you're watching the movie, and what, it's 46 years or 44 years later.
Yeah.
We know what they're talking about.
Sure.
But they're trying not to spoil it for the audience. And Siskel thinks, absolutely, he's got to warn this audience. This isn't Star Wars. This isn't for your kids. It's a horror movie. And it's bloody and it's scary. And Ebert said, yeah, absolutely. It's this, a scary movie.
Oh, sure.
Ebert loved one part of this movie. And that's when they find the alien spaceship.
Yeah. When
they go down and they had that part where they were watching it, and he said, and he later on he would even write, he wasn't necessarily a fan of the movie, but that one part, he doesn't think the rest of the movie keeps up with it. But that one part of the movie, it transcends science fiction. It transcends horror, where it is this literal masterpiece. And our modern audience, I think we almost skip over it. Just Sigourney Weaver's not in it.
Yeah. But no, that scene, I remember, like, for years, like that scene being parts of it replicated for TV shows, commercials, movies, just like people trying to recreate the feeling of that scene, of people walking into a place that hasn't been touched in unknown time, or people walking into a space station or into a... It's the concept of, like, entering the unknown, but it's not a spooky basement. It's not an old warehouse. It's not an old castle. It's not an old haunted house way back off the road. It's the spaceship. It's like Star Wars was 2 years prior, and it was a used, rusty science fiction, but this is like, you can smell the grease in this kind of science fiction. I mean, it's like, I bet that spaceship smells like diesel fuel and grease, kind of like, oh man. Hearing people talk about, like, how that's not part of how much, and they want to get paid more if they're going to be doing this, and people like arguing about pay and stuff like that. It's like very, very easy to understand. And then on top of it, you have this like mythicness that's like being like subtly added to like all these fine details of like panels and screens, and like how things are set up for keyboards and stuff like that. All these hidden details of symbols and symbology and mysticism are hidden in the background of this movie. So it's like it's horror, but it's science fiction, and there's weird mysticism, and it's like, sounds like weird fiction to me, man.
Absolutely. And the truth is, I am closer to Captain Dallas than I'll ever be Captain Kirk.
Very true, very true.
And it's not just because of the beard. And you're absolutely right. There's these hidden things where it's subconsciously unlocking sort of a dimension, but there's also brilliant things. The thing that I remember the most is that stupid bird toy.
Yeah.
It's iconic now because, yes, you're going to put things like that on your workplace.
Yeah.
And if you look real carefully, there's a picture of Jones, the cat, on one of the computers as a kitten.
Oh, okay.
So absolutely. Speaking of Jones, I have
Mm-hmm.
3 Jones stories.
Okay.
So you know how the cat looks so scared?
Yeah.
You know how they got that scene?
How?
They brought a Doberman on stage.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. I mean, it couldn't get there. I mean, it was locked up, but that's what. Also,
Yeah, yeah.
there were 4 orange cats that played Jones, right?
Yeah.
And Sigourney Weaver started having this terrible allergic reaction.
Okay.
And it turned out that they thought it was the cat, but
Yeah.
it turned out it was like the gel that they put on to make it, look like she's sweating.
Uh-huh.
And they had to have this debate because it would have been easier to replace her than it would have been the orange cat.
Yeah.
Who was going to go? Who were they going to kick out?
Yeah, yeah. And she was nobody at the time. So,
Yep.
Yeah. And those cats, that's a lot of money. All right. Yeah, no, Alien. What else can we talk about this movie? Like how it falls into cosmic horror. I mean, it's science fiction. It's horror, but would it really be considered cosmic horror?
So there's this guy. He's not as famous, popular, as cool as you and I.
Sure.
His name's Stephen King.
Okay.
And I try to throw his name out as much as I can because he's got a kid and I want him to get work.
Yeah.
But so he's got this little book called Danse Macabre.
Sure.
And in Danse Macabre, he explains that this is Lovecraftian for the new generation. That the Eldritch horrors and the outer gods are no longer coming to Earth. We are going to them.
Yeah.
And he said, and his argument of horror is, he says, at the end, the heroine kills the monster with a spear gun in her underwear. How more horror can you get than that?
True, very true. And I feel like we're using a lot of different endings from different movies kind of at this point in time. Like if you think of movies that have been big summer blockbusters or any of them use a spear gun in them? Any of them have a woman escaping in like just barely her underwear? I think we've talked about, oh no, we haven't talked about that yet. We have some films coming up that definitely describe that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that Stephen King kid, I buy some of his books because I'm afraid he's just going to starve to death if we don't.
Oh yeah. But yeah, no, it's like it's like Dan O'Bannon thought to himself, "Hey, what if Jaws could run around?"
Exactly, and very much. I don't know if he consciously thought of Jaws.
Mm-hmm.
I can see a lot of the fear and stuff, but the alien is different. The alien is closer. The xenomorph is closer to Jaws, than it is of, say,
Michael Myers or
the aliens, the Martians from the 50s, or
because
it does this. Very Lovecraftian. It doesn't care. Humans are breeding sources and food sources.
Mm-hmm.
There's no hate. It's in its DNA, just like it is in the shark.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe you could say that Michael Myers and the shark are very similar with the and Jaws. Well, okay, so like I guess the alien doesn't even have like lifeless eyes or evil eyes or little doll eyes or it has no eyes. It doesn't see. We're not going to go into alien physiology in this episode, but yeah, they have a we're kind of like walking around it too ourselves, Dave. We haven't talked about the scene. We've talked about other stuff, but I think just in case no one has seen Alien, we're gonna not spoil the scene, and we're gonna walk around that too. But Yeah, you've got this you've got this creature that can walk around. It can it starts out as an egg, and then the egg hatches later, and then it grows into a it goes from a little guy to a big guy, and then the other movies go more into like the life cycle of a xenomorph, but that's not what we're going to talk about here.
If you want to go to Xenomorph 101.
Yeah. But the thing is, though, is it grows, and it grows fast, and it sheds stuff, and it grows, and it sheds, and it grows. So from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie, you have this little snakety guy that then grows into this big, huge, jet black monstrosity that bleeds acid and can climb on walls and ceilings and through air ducts and just all around your ship.
Absolutely. And the fact that it takes place on a ship, it's a huge ship. I think it's supposed to be like 3 stories, 700 feet, but it's still claustrophobic.
Yes. Yeah, because you're still stuck inside, and everything is as efficient as possible on a spaceship. You don't have like big rooms on like essentially a semi truck.
Exactly. It's more like a cargo freighter than the Enterprise.
Yeah. No, it as a child, my father was in the Navy, and I got to go inside of these naval vessels, and yeah, it was really, really, really tight quarters. And I've even personally, I've been on schooners, like a 3-masted schooner. I did some summer programs when I was younger, and yeah, no, it's tight quarters just on ships, because you have to carry everything with you. And when you're on your spaceship, hey, you've got everything with you if you packed it, but you can't go anywhere else. You are literally in the vacuum of space, and there's like no escape. And literally, because of the vacuum of space, no one can hear you scream. The tagline for Aliens. Yes. But yeah, no. What else do we have? Do you know anything else about Alien that you think we should be talking about?
Well, I think we did a pretty good job of covering it. Other than we absolutely got to give credit to Giger.
Oh yeah, H.R. Geiger, whichever you want to, however you want to say his name. H.R. Giger, German, Austrian, I can't remember. Czechoslovakian, Polish. I can't. He's from that part of the world, and he's passed, but tremendous artwork.
He was a big Lovecraftian.
Yes. Even had a book called Necronomicon.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. And I do want to go back to Dan O'Bannon for a moment, who came up with the concept of this during the filming of the John Carpenter student film Dark Star, where a character, I believe played by Dan O'Bannon, has a pet alien, which is a giant beach ball, and the way that they get rid of it is launching it out an airlock.
Yes.
And I think that, in combination of possibly seeing Jaws, made some stuff click in O'Bannon's brain.
No, you can. If you've seen Dark Star, you definitely see where parts of it have, are in the DNA of the movie Alien.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Just more money.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and thankfully Alien has more money, or we would be talking about a beach ball.
Yeah, it looks like a tomato.
Yeah, all right. Well, everyone, thank you again for listening to us jabber about Lovecraft, Lovecraftiana, spookiness, science fiction, horror, fantasy, and all that fun stuff. If you are listening to this right now, there is the chance that you can fly to Portland, Oregon, and not miss the very tail end of Fan Expo 2023, Portland, Oregon. So check us out. There is going to be a link in the show notes on where and when to find us. And I will be at booth 1133. So yeah, check us out. And thank you for listening. Go to the show links to find out how to support us. Go to pgttcm.com for all the show links. Go to pgttcm on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all the regular places. And yeah, check us out there. Find out what's going on with the show, new episodes, any events we've got going on, any products we're trying to peddle. And that's it for now. Thank you again, everyone. Dave and I say goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
We'll see you next time. All right, that was a good episode.
Yeah.